This session is being recorded. It will be archived on the Department Career and Education website for future viewing. So I just want to let everyone know I just began the recording for this session. The other quick logistic is towards the end of the session, I will drop a link to an exit ticket in the chat box. Completing that exit ticket is how you trigger an email that will send you a certificate with your contact hour in it. So it's important to complete that that exit ticket, and it'll drop in the chat box towards the last few minutes of this session. So with just those two logistics, I'm going to turn it over to our two presenters. Lynette Payne is the Director of Community Connection for the Wyndham-Raymond School District, and Rick Wilson is the Director of Community Outreach for the Brunswick School District. And they both are our presenters today. Thank you both for your willingness to share your experience and your insight.
Go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say welcome, and I hope this is, we're trying to create kind of an umbrella, broad reach that maybe everybody, depending on where you're from, will be able to pick up something, take away. We're not trying to overanalyze or make this like super scientific, because it is basic common sense about developing relationships in your community and how can you leverage those in your school district. So, Lynette.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're generally talking about learning outside the classroom. You'll hear a few terms like ELOs and job shadows and internships and things pop up, but the basic idea is anything that's really not a traditional in the classroom sort of way of teaching and learning. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and we'll go through a bunch of different methods that might work. But we are a small enough group that it would be nice to hear first names, what your job title is, and what district you're with, keeping in mind to still keep it short so that we can hear from everyone, and then we can tailor a little bit to who we know is in the room. So I think Deb, you were the first one on my list if you want to share yours first.
Okay, Debbie Buber. I am from the Pittsfield district. I work at Warsaw Middle School teaching 5th and 6th grade science.
Fantastic. Jessie?
Hi, my name is Jessie. I am the academic tutor for the after-school program for the DRL Stonington Elementary School. We have kids up to 8th grade, and we are looking to build our program and do some more non-traditional learning, especially with the older boys and girls.
Fantastic. Erica?
Can I jump in?
Oh,
I'm from DRL Stonington. So hello, Jessie.
Who are you? Wait, hold on.
I was Debbie Verisco. Susan and Terry Siebert are relatives of mine. They work in that district.
I think I know them. It's good.
Sorry, I just had to say something.
You can also use the chat box to communicate with one another, and the chat box is open. I'm not sure where it pops up on your screen. That's another way to connect as well, and you can send private messages.
But that's awesome that we already have people who know each other from different places.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Erica.
Hi, it's great to see everybody today. I am Erica Watson. I'm the Executive Director for the Oxford Hills Community Education Exchange. And so thanks for offering this today. I really appreciate your time.
Scarlett?
Hi, I'm Scarlett McAvoy. I teach grade 1 at Katahdin Elementary School.
Kelly?
Hi, Kelly Vicknier, and I work with RSU 83, Behavioral Special Ed.
And Jan?
I am Jan Martin, and I teach reading recovery and reading interventions at Katahdin Elementary School.
And Diana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Diana Dwyron. I work for the Maine Department of Education, and one of my roles at the Department of Ed is Career and Education Development Specialist.
And Meg.
Hi, I'm Meg Harvey. I also work at the Department of Education, and I work with career and technical education. And right now I am trying to lift the middle school initiative, middle school career and technical education.
Awesome. So it seems we have more of the lower to middle grades in this chat. So Rick and I will do our best to include examples and things like that that are more applicable to the lower-ish grades. But with that in mind, go ahead, Rick.
Okay, so this actually is a perfect place to start. It's something that we did last fall with the Brunswick community. It's a simple Google form. I'll talk about the responses. Lynette, if you could click on the actual survey, give people an idea of what the survey consists of. It's very short and sweet. We posted it on the district webpage and, you know, shared this around with various community partners that I have. And it is just a questionnaire that asks folks, you know, what your professional career title set may be, and please briefly describe and give us some contact information. And most importantly, on the bottom, are you willing to work with us in some capacity, either to host a class field trip, host a student job shadow, guest speaker, be a guest speaker, participate in a career day event, be a professional mentor, or participate in a job fair. And these kind of cover a lot of the silos at Brunswick High School that I'm involved with. And I think they're pretty basic components to any community in terms of trying to see what are your resources out there. And I was really surprised at the response. We had 136 people that reached out. We intend on putting this out there again to kind of even expand that base. And all of the answers would go back to the first the original slide. You can see the surveys. It was all basically calculated out there. You know, Google form is awesome. You know, it'll give you that breakdown. And I was able to kind of like categorize, who would be interested in a field trip, host, guest speaker, et cetera. And this really yielded a lot of interesting. I've lived in the Brunswick community like all of my life, and I never knew down the road was an opera singer, sang in New York City for several years, and the music teacher was like really the choral teacher at the high school was really amped. And not only the high school, but obviously music is K-12, and that opera singer, became kind of a fixture guest speaker, if you will, as an option. So that's something that anybody can do, and it's really simple, and I think it may yield some great results for you guys. And it's kind of like my you'll see a different form later on that I use internally with schools that asks, are you looking for a particular guest speaker in a particular area? So I think, Lynette, in terms of the people that are embedded in schools like Lynette and I, our job is to be largely a matchmaker for district teachers. And when I say district, we're moving to a K-12 framework. Right now, my focus really is more of like grade 8 through 12. I'm excited to have Meg here. Meg's been a part of various conversations regarding kind of what Lynette and I try to do in our schools. And the middle school is a real sweet spot, but there's a lot of conversation, and Diana can speak to this later on, maybe if we have time, about the important K-5 conversation as well. All of this is very, very connected, obviously, and if you hadn't had a chance to look at the career education standards or when they're finally finalized, you will you will see that all of that is interconnected. So I thought it was a good first place to start, and just kind of encourage people to maybe consider doing that in your community.
Awesome. And so when we were talking about the work that we do and what pieces can be accomplished either through full-time positions like ours, all the way through individual teachers who are maybe willing to put in a little bit of extra time to get a little something done, and everything in between, there were 9 big pots of things that are really ways to get students interacting outside of a traditional context that we see as working across the state. From things that are really far reaching, like career fairs or like large group speakers, where you have somebody come into the auditorium and talk to an entire grade level or something like that, all the way over to the really intensive, in-depth individual work like 4-credit internships. So we're going to talk about each of these a little bit, but we wanted to show that there is this spectrum of things that are really, really wide and far-reaching, where you can have a touch with basically every student in your school or your district, to these things that are really, really deep for fewer students, and that your school district might have a very different place it wants to be. Mine right now is very much on the wide side of things. We don't have any 4-credit opportunities. We don't have internships that we're doing, none of that. We're very much on the wide side for now. But there's other districts that we interact with that are very much on the deep side. All they have are 4-credit internships, and they don't have anything else. And so it really depends on your school district where you want to get started. And also another graph, because I like graphs, is looking at how much resource you have. Do you have somebody like Rick or I, where you can just jump right into all of these things and maybe offer some of everything or offer a ton of something? Or do you have one teacher or one counselor or one administrator who's willing to dedicate, a half an hour a week to make something happen? And so where you are within that really impacts not necessarily what you choose to do as a district, but how much of it. I think most things you can still do. It's just a matter of how big it becomes. So here you'll see that, there's everything from a volunteer to somebody who has a duty assignment. And I don't know if that looks differently at elementary levels than it does at high school level, but that's, like a half-hour a day required time, to having it be a class period assignment, to maybe getting an extra stipend if you agree to do it, all the way up to half-time, full-time, or some districts who have multiple positions that are doing this work. So that's just a big picture overview of what we're going to touch on, is the different buckets of opportunities that might be a good fit for your district. We're not really going to talk today about internships specifically, because that's coming up in a later conversation. We're not going to talk about CTE, because that's also another thing. And we're not going to talk specifically K-5 only, because we have a lot of elementary people on this call. We'll make sure that we talk about things that can be used in those lower grades, but we're not going to talk about anything that is only for that grade level.
Okay, so in terms of career fairs, I support our eighth grade at the junior high for the first year in a while decided they wanted to have a career fair, and I helped set that up. I think it's important to know that statewide there are many regional school career fairs, and the COVID era, if you will, has created even what are deemed virtual career fairs. And this is a great example of what they did in Oxford Hills. And you can see that this was a career fair through the technical school, and it is what it is. On the side, you're also seeing Indeed.com, which is a good search engine that I know I tend to send high school kids to. So, but career fairs obviously can exist and should exist at the elementary level. Becomes kind of a giant show and tell, and I am looking forward to kind of working with K through 5 teachers to create that, because it makes our job easier to not just silo these experiences at the middle school level or the high school level. And I think, Lynette, you had made the comment about busing and signups.
Yeah, so if you're looking at like particularly high school level or 8th grade level, sometimes it's just much easier, especially in the first few years, to find a school that's already doing a career fair and just join them. Ask them to have their people stay an extra hour so your students can come before or after their students are there. And then all you have to do is have a bus and the traditional permission slips, and you don't have to get the tables and the snacks and all of the different vendors and all of that. It makes it so much easier. And there are businesses that are willing to pay for the busing for that. So if busing is an issue, there are some options to be able to do that. That's at the high school level though. There aren't very many like middle school career fairs as such that would be an easy fit. But at the high school or the 8th grade level, you can definitely do that. So that was career fairs. There's other options that are also pretty far reaching. And one of them that I use a lot at Wyndham Raymond is school-wide speakers or panels, or at least the whole school is invited. So, for example, I might have the Batman illustrator, lives in Portland. Very cool, kids think he's awesome. So I'll ask him to come in and speak in our auditorium. And then I can invite, we have a sort of a campus setup where we are. So I can invite students from the high school and the middle school and the elementary school to all come over and participate in that. And teachers can individually decide if they want their groups to go. So it makes it a lot less coordination for me. I just make the invite and make sure there's enough space for who I'm inviting. I can also do the same thing. There's CDOG's broadcaster came in pretty recently. That very cool, but a much smaller pool of people who would be interested in that. Fewer teachers were excited about that. So it was much more of a classroom sized thing. And then I just made sure students knew they had to sign up to go. And that's how that worked. And they had to, make sure it was okay with their teachers before they came to that thing. I really like using speakers and panels this way because, one, it's really easy for me. So this is a good thing if you just have somebody who's like stipended or is a volunteer, because all you have to do is make sure you have a space. You have to let the right people know. And if you have a cool speaker, that's really easy. You just send an email out to some teachers and they say, I'm in. And then you just have to make sure that like your guest knows when to show up, knows where to go, has someone there to like help them around, that kind of stuff. So for me, this is something I use pretty often because it really opens the opportunity to really anyone who decides it's something they care about, including teachers. So I don't have to specifically find teachers and match up opportunities. I can just say, this is an opportunity that's available and anyone who's interested can choose to join it.
It's a great way to also interface with state resources. I'll reference the Maine State Library, which has a great bicentennial program. Unfortunately, the state's bicentennial is being overshadowed currently, but we were really we were pleased to have the library reach out to us with like these virtual headsets to learn about Maine history, and that became a school-wide experience for the 4th graders at our elementary school.
So once again, we're moving, smaller and smaller and deeper and deeper. And so that brings us to classroom speakers, which when possible, I like to pair school-wide speakers with classroom speakers. So I have somebody who agrees to come out for a couple of hours. They do a school-wide thing. And then after that, they go into a classroom or two. So the individual, the business, or whoever is coming and giving their time feels it only one time during the school year. But I get to use them for 3 different things. So that's something to really keep in mind whenever you're doing these experiences that are not traditional, where you're getting students connected to outside resources, is to really do what you can to make the people you're connecting them to not feel like they're being overworked or overtired by what you're asking them to do. So, you know, my authors that I have come in, I only ask them to come in one time during the year, and they know I'm not going to keep using them over and over and over again too much, but I try to keep them a little bit longer. For classroom speakers, it goes one of two ways. Either I'll have a teacher who comes to me and says, I would really like this thing. I have that a lot with like math teachers who are just like, I want any way I can get to make math seem real to these students. And so I'll bring in like Chimbro, and they'll talk about cranes and how there's all of the mathematics and trigonometry and all of that in working cranes, you know, that sort of thing. So it works that way, or it goes the other way where I just know there's this super cool human that is like right in our area. And I'm like, how could we not bring in a mermaid or whatever random thing it is that the kids are going to find really cool? And I say, it was a video game designer last year. It's like, he makes video games and he's willing to let your students make a section of the video game. And so you say that to teachers and they're like, I'm in. So it can go one of either ways. Something to know about bringing in classroom teachers is depending on the teacher and the subject area, there can be a lot of preparation to make sure everyone is happy and that it aligns well with the content. So that's just something to keep in mind if that's a direction you're leaning, is the more specialized the content area, the more the teacher is going to want to know exactly what that person's going to talk about, which takes a lot more back and forth and a lot more of your time.
So in terms of Brunswick classroom support in garnering like what the requests are, again, I created a quick Google form that I use with teachers that ask them, you know, what's the topic? You know, I'll try to, maybe we don't have anybody, but I could research it and reach out and find something in the area of not only guest speakers, but in terms of field trips, student enrichment, or pathway credit, which is very much something that we do at the high school more and more, or even community service, and then have them indicate what their idea is, and you know, help them with a little of the logistical questions, and specific dates, and do you need a bus? Transportation obviously is an issue, and at our school we have a rotating schedule, so I try to pin them down a little bit on the black or the orange day, and special needs, and kind of go from there, and then take that request and try to cultivate that into an actual experience for students. So that's, I spend probably most of my time with guest speakers and an occasional field trip. Group business tours, supporting teachers, professional development tool. Obviously, somebody wants to go to an area of business, and this can be K-5 or K-12 for that matter. We arrange that. I actually help teachers negotiate or navigate the whole bus routine in terms of reserving a bus and helping them with the field trip forms, really trying to make it easier for the teacher to get outside and learn outside of their classroom. The professional development tool comment or notation there deals with actually arranging for teachers after school. We found this to be very effective. We all have professional development needs or requirements in our district, and we created these professional learning groups. And one at Brunswick High School I chaired, and essentially what it was is taking teachers, groups of teachers, into the community and taking them on tours. Like we have Wayfair, that's a big company now on the former Brunswick Naval Air Station base, and other business, whatever the business is, and had them really try to imagine supporting their curriculum with these various field trips. And the teachers created a list of places they would love to see, and you know, I felt that was very beneficial in getting them to imagine, you know, learning outside of the classroom. And the other side of it was many teachers don't live in their community, at least in in our Southern Maine region. So they got to learn a lot about their community that they never knew. And I'm a lifelong Brunswick resident. I have to tell you, I learn new things every time I go on a field trip in Brunswick. So I guess that goes both ways. But.
Yeah, so just a couple of examples of what we mean by group business tours or what it can mean. So at RSU 14, I both bring businesses in for a business tour sorts of things and send students out. So Jordan Small is one of our middle schools. It's a pretty small middle school for our district. It only has about 40 students a grade, which our other middle school has about 200. So there's a pretty big difference. But what that means is that it takes only one bus for our entire 8th grade to be able to go out on a business trip. So they're able to do that when our other middle school, we just logistically, we can't have that happen. And so for Jordan Small, for the 8th graders, what I do is I find businesses in Wyndham, so in our local area, who are willing to have groups of 3 to 8 middle school students come for 2 hours in the morning. And what happens is the bus makes a bus route, well, I make a bus route, for the bus to take to drop kids off all along in groups of 3 to 8 with a teacher or another staff member. And they go through an hour and a half to 2 hour business tour of what it looks like to be in that business. I choose pretty interactive sorts of places. So it's like a horse farm or like a physical therapist that will let them do all of the training and play with the equipment and that kind of stuff, or an automotive place that will let them help work on one of the cars, that kind of stuff. And so they do that for about an hour and a half, and then they go back, the bus picks them all back up again on the same way. So it's one bus, it makes it pretty simple. And for me, it's just the logistics of making sure the businesses are on board. They know how many students there's going to be. I talk with them about what it does look like to have an interactive session to make sure it's really engaging. And then they really just want to make sure that everyone has signed the right forms and that they know when the kids will get there and when they will leave so they can plan their lives accordingly. And that runs pretty smoothly and doesn't actually take very much time. The first time I did it, it took a little time just figuring out how to do this stuff. But now that it exists, it's a really, really efficient system. Another thing that I'm lucky to have in my district is we have something called an adventure van at the high school that are basically one of our clubs has the right to this van. So they've purchased this vehicle and they use it to go on fishing trips and kayaking, backpacking, and all that kind of stuff. But when they're not taking trips, it just sits and it doesn't have another purpose. So they have been willing to let me use it anytime they don't. And so what that means is that I have the opportunity to go with groups of 5 to 7 students to really anywhere I want to, because I don't have to follow the rules of when you get a bus. You don't have to pay bus mileage. I literally just pay for gas and that's it, which is wonderful. And so what that means is that I'm able to take 5 students to go up to a specific health fair where it's only health careers that they can go and learn about. Or we can go to a forest and learn about ecology sorts of things with just a small group of students who are interested in that. And I can find that out either through surveys or through a teacher who asks for a specific group of students to be able to do something, or even sometimes the principals will say, hey, we have this group of students who's really disengaged. We want them to show up to school, but they're not going to do anything in class anyway. So let's get them re-engaged in the interaction of school in some of these trips. So if there is anything like that in your district, or the ability for anything like that, that's really helpful. Busing, once again, is the hardest part about leaving the school area, at least for us it is. And so having a vehicle that you can kind of snag when it's free has been really helpful for us.
So this is a very rich slide that has a lot of application for K-12 and has stemmed largely a lot of this focus came for me anyways from the COVID virtual situation that we are in. And to kind of loop it back to learning outside of the classroom, everybody has a story, and I think it's a very, very powerful thing at any grade level. As a matter of fact, we have a mentoring unit in one of my classes where we go to the elementary school, and the title of the unit is Everyone Has a Story, and we talk about their story and other people's stories, and it's a great way, just such a solid way to learn about different careers. So I wanted to just quickly show like the launch pads for these websites. Some of them are Maine-based. The last two are Maine-based. The first two are nationally used, and we're actually, there are some Maine schools that use virtual job shadow. I think there are probably 15 or 20 that are using virtual job shadow at the moment. Not as many are using Nepris, but let's take a look at virtual job shadow, because within that, you will see that there is a K-5 element platform. So you see right there, you have your different levels, and there are 17 different career clusters within VJS Junior. And I think if you click on VJS Junior, easy for me to say, you can see some of the interactive, very cartoony. This is very common that these types of platforms at that age level are kind of incorporating high interest, almost gaming, cartoony types of demonstrations, depictions of various jobs. And with virtualjobshadow.com, you are actually shadowing. You have the ability, if you were to purchase this, and I actually know it's $2,000 for like 300 licenses. I haven't found the money yet, but you can shadow. You're able to see a very highly produced set of experiences within a particular cluster, and so that's kind of like virtualjobshadow.com. We can take a quick look at Nepris, which allows you to arrange, and the cost of this is a little more expensive. It's more like $4,000, I think, for 500 seat licenses. And what this allows you to do is, if you can request, let's say you want to request an exotic animal vet to interview, they will in 2 weeks find somebody around the country and arrange this for you. And they also have a library with literally thousands of these types of conversations recorded. And it's not as highly produced as virtualjobshadow.com, but a lot of teachers like the ability to, the ones that I've spoken to. Again, my district is looking at it. We don't know which direction we're going to go in, or if we'll ever have money again, but that's another story. But this allows you to really arrange conversations with professionals live. So the virtual job shadow, which is highly produced, is not live. This can be live, and they hold weekly seminars of live conversations where they'll advertise and tell you, hey, look, we're going to be meeting with a heart surgeon on Wednesday, sign up. And at the high school level, it's a great way to kind of like augment their job shadows and other things that they're doing, maybe in the community with different professionals. So that's Nepris. Destination Occupation is from one of our very own. Rachel, her last name escapes me, but this is all about Maine-based companies, where she's done, highly produced little vignettes of what it's like to work at these various careers in Maine, and it's great. And speaking about Maine, the Junior Achievement of Maine, because of the virtual world that we're living in, have kind of like shifted to a similar framework, where they have interviewed a bunch of folks within. I don't know if you're not familiar with Junior Achievement of Maine. It's a great organization that deals with teaching about financial literacy and some career connections. And there's a grade K-5 session in this component. I didn't point out in NEPRIS. NEPRIS has a specific K-5 component as well to them. So that's something where you can kind of really bang around in there and see if some of that stuff fits. Now, we also have Zoom, which we are becoming very, very familiar with, obviously, or Google Meet. And, from the community survey, I was able to kind of arrange, let's say with the opera singer, a one-on-one Zoom with a student that was interested in just simply interviewing this person. So that just kind of gives you a little virtual example, I guess, of the good old-fashioned one-on-one interviews. I mean, there's nothing that's going to replace having the policeman, fireman, doctor come into the classroom and do the class presentation. But this may be a way to kind of augment those experiences during this time. So.
Well, and also for those of you who are maybe in more rural locations, having, now silver lining, we're all now aware of Zoom and Google Meet. And so asking somebody to come in and do a one-on-one interview with a student that is from 3 hours away really logistically doesn't work that well. But if you ask for somebody to do a 20-minute Zoom interview with that student, then it becomes a whole different ballgame. And so something that was not even remotely a possibility before now can be in some way. And so that's the idea with online resources, is they don't replace face-to-face, but if that's not an option, you can use this in a lot of different ways.
I won't spend a ton of time on this because this is really kind of specific to my world in terms of day-long job shadows for students. At the end, if we want to ask questions, I'm happy to elaborate on these. I will say that my feeling with making connections with partners, and Lynette's already kind of alluded to this, you have to be careful of their time and their willingness to have somebody in their space. And day-long job shadows sometimes are tough. 2 hours is kind of a sweet spot for most of our partners. 2 to 4 hours. Day-long job shadows, are a little more difficult. I really admire, the CTE world is a different world, and the pull-out programs that exist, for high school kids, and now for some middle school kids, because you have to find that willing community partner, and it's all about developing relationships. I think at the elementary school level, what we're finding is our volunteers, I'm becoming more involved with our district volunteer program. And the reason is because it's a way to kind of mine what the skill sets are of the volunteers. So I for example, I had 132 people fill out the community survey, but we have over 600 volunteers or whatever in Brunswick K-12. And these volunteers possess a lot of various skill sets. And it's those parents in your elementary classes that you know of that are really the connection to the career world that is out there. So hopefully we've given you some ideas on how to maybe leverage that, but it all starts with basically who your neighbor is. So again, this is really a high school centric deal here. It's four credit independent work, 4 credit semester long internships. This will be covered in depth in a future session that Diane and Meg are offering. I don't know how much time we want to spend on.
I say none.
Right.
If you are interested in more information, Rick can give you the details. for his particular program, which you will probably also hear if you go to the internship session. So just a reminder that, like we've talked about, you know, a lot of different options that are available depending on whether you want to cast a wide net or you want to go really deep, at all different levels of how much you have to give as far as human resources. And then obviously there's the question of what's right for your district. And I kind of put these into two separate categories because in my experience and in the experience of a lot of the people doing this work that I've interacted with, things like large group speakers, classroom speakers, and business tours in a group setting tend to be the easier options if you don't have a high level of resources. So they're kind of low-hanging fruit because businesses are more willing to do those things. It takes a little bit more effort to convince them the other things are things they are capable of helping with as well. They tend to have fewer logistics overall because they're like a one-time effort. So even if there's a lot of little details and paperworky things and whatnot, it's all working up to one thing that is then over. And so that tends to make it a lot easier if you don't have a full-time one of us, or you have a new full-time person that is just starting to get the groove. The things on the left-hand side, these are really quality for in-depth experiences for those students who you know could really benefit from really being able to engage in either career exploration or just topic exploration of something they care about that isn't really in their day-to-day school life, but they do take more effort, more time, more resources, at least to expand beyond just a few students. But if you're thinking of that one student, then these might be a better option to be looking at for your one or two students than the things on the right. And do you want to spend time with this, or should we switch over to Q&A?
I think Lynette's already kind of brought up that there's various ways to shape this within your school building, and it comes down to creative leadership. And, you know, can a stipend be reworked? At the high school, we rework stipends all the time to apply to different initiatives that we want to kind of promote. We've actually had duty assignments taken away as an incentive, so that that person is no longer has lunch duty, but instead has, you know, community cultivation duty, if you will. So, you know, there's some creativity there, and I guess it's good to note that there are these superstructures that exist, and there's some great resources within both of these with people such as Lynette and I that are doing this. Some of them doing it at the K-12 level. New Hampshire's kind of been ahead of the game in the extended learning opportunity area, and most of those schools are K-12 in their efforts with pathways and career stuff. So I want to make sure we have time for questions. If anybody has any.
I would probably just add something for Lynette was talking about doing some business tours at the high school level. I know that for us, we have 8 elementary schools, and one of them is in downtown Norway. So the elementary kids, I think it's their 3rd grade, will do a walking tour of businesses right in that downtown. So it you know, they get to kind of get out into their own community. And then the Otisfield School, which is fairly small, their 2nd graders will do a in-class exercise where they learn about the idea of community and that they're part of a community. And then they'll learn about mapping in north, south, east, and west, and how to read a map. And then they map out a route for their bus to take, and they go to 4 different businesses, ending, of course, at an ice cream store. So that's a really fun activity for them to, at each business, they get to meet with somebody there and take a little tour, and it's right where they live. So just to give the, K-5 folks an idea if they haven't thought of those. I know that those are both pretty successful endeavors. So
I've actually had, in many school districts, you have mentoring programs between like the high school and the elementary school. And I've had high school kids that were really into the whole career education thing that have led some of these conversations and have taken kids through various career education lessons, if you will, and have actually organized those types of tours that you're talking about, Erica. It's a great idea.
I was also going to say, I appreciate the breakdown of sort of, things that you can do that are less labor intensive versus maybe a little bit more labor intensive, because, I know from the prior director from my position, they capped internships at 12. I have the foggiest idea why. My experience would tell me that I can guess some of the labor intensive work involved in that. But I just appreciate kind of getting some more wisdom around that, because I know it's something like our board really wants more of, and so do I, but it is a little bit more labor intensive than I think people probably realize.
It definitely is, and like I've said, there's a lot of people like I say us, like Rick and I, who do specifically this out of school sort of thing as most of our job, and there are some of us that do mostly internships, and you're right that it ends up being a dozen or 2 dozen that one full-time staff member can really work with in a semester. And that's really it. If they're going to do a good job, and if they're going to be interacting with the businesses appropriately and creating quality curriculum and everything surrounding that, where I can host a pretty much infinite number of classroom speakers as one person as well. So it's really just about which thing is more important in your district, and what type of reach you most want.
Diana, did you want to speak about the K-5?
So I'm going to just plant seeds. Rick and Lynette have mentioned that there are other sessions coming up. And next week we have a one on high school internships on Tuesday. And on Thursday, we have the CTE middle school pilots. And then the following week, June 2nd, we are going to have a session devoted to K-5 career awareness. Because our belief system is that career development is a lifelong journey, and it begins in the home and in the elementary schools in terms of building career awareness and aspirations, and also just all the day in and day out things that you do to help students learn who they are as learners and build their interpersonal relationships. So it will, there's much to talk about across the whole spectrum, and I've just been really grateful to Rick and Lynette for their willingness to share their insights and kick off this discussion. I echo what Erica said in terms of just how you framed it, in terms of wide and depth and energy in terms of logistics and the management of that, as I think is really helpful as people think about their first dip of toe in the water in terms of what aligns well with their district and their district's desires or outcomes for students, and where the resources are. The low-hanging fruit is a great place to start to build some energy and momentum and excitement with the students as well. So I just really appreciate that. I'm wondering from our folks that are on, in terms of initially, as you've been listening, a takeaway, I'm kind of queuing up as well for the exit survey, but I'm wondering if you have thoughts that you might want to share with our two speakers in terms of something that resonated that they have said, a question that you're wondering about, or or something that you're wondering in terms of how to begin those conversations, either with an administrator or with colleagues, or what connections you have in the community that you may have as places to start. So I'm trying to offer a lot of on-roads into just connecting with the speakers before our time ends, to give each of you a chance to kind of touch base with them. And while you're doing that, I am going to drop the exit ticket link into the chat box.
I mean, I don't want to dominate the questions or comments, but I'm certainly open in our last, however many minutes to hear a little bit about how you approach teachers or curriculum developers, who it is that you've had to work with. Because I'm brand new at my school, so, I'm still trying to sort things out. So any advice there is greatly appreciated.
Sure. I'll start and be brief. So when I approach teachers, if I have a speaker already in mind, somebody I know would be very interested in working with students and would do a good job, I approach teachers who are in that content area. And I simply say, hey, I have this speaker, sometimes great speaker, if I know enough about them to be able to say, I really encourage you to think of this person. But then it's really, if this person fits into your curriculum somewhere, like, let's talk about it. So I really approach it when I bring something to teachers from a take it or leave it. You know your classroom, you know your curriculum, you know where you're at and whether it fits or it doesn't, and really don't take it personally. Like, I've had some pretty amazing speakers that I just didn't end up having come in because no one wanted them at that time. And that's sad for me because I like cool people coming to school, but it's also important that teachers know that you're partnering with them and that you're never going to try and like guilt them into taking somebody that they don't think is a good fit, because they have a strategy and they know their job. When teachers come to me with a speaker, especially when it's a speaker request that I'm not positive I can get, at least in the time frame, I often will have a teacher come and be like, can you have this happen next week? I'll have to say, there's pretty often I say no. I can't get you a speaker in a week because it takes more than a week to do the back and forth with a potential speaker. To make sure they know what the expectations are. So being really honest when somebody comes to you and, asks you if you can get this very specific person to come into the school, be like, I really don't think so. I'll try, I'll let you know. So I guess honesty when they come to you is the biggest thing, like about your capabilities. Don't oversell yourself if you can't do it, because that messes with their curriculum. Again, you don't want to mess with the teacher's curriculum. You want to be an extra thing that's helpful to them.
Yeah, it's well said. You're an ally, and it's like sales, and you can't get upset if you can't make the connection. I try to make it as easy as possible. Like I said, I'll go above and beyond. I'll even fill out paperwork for a teacher. I'll say, hey, I'll take care of the buses for you, or I'll create a permission slip for you, or whatever, just to kind of like grease the tracks and allow that to happen. I think it's important too for folks that don't have that person in their school to understand that the genesis of like my job took, it's been 25 years to get to the point where kind of like where we're at right now. And Lynette, you have an interesting story because you were an AmeriCorps volunteer. Is that correct?
No.
No.
Close. I was supposed to run an AmeriCorps program that our school used to have, and it got cut. So I created my job myself.
So, I mean, and each of us has the story, and I think, again, I'll go right back to creative leadership. Maybe you have to plant the seed in your administrator's mind and say, look, we need someone to help leverage community contact or learning in the community. It could be called place-based learning, service learning, whatever it is. It's learning outside of the classroom, and that's usually an easy sell to an administrator. And then obviously you need to be compensated, or somebody does, and you have to try to get creative. And I think it's game on after that, because people will really see that it's effective. And you do need somebody shepherding, I think, and always thinking about implementing area professionals into the classroom, so it's not just one-off all the time. But
So we just have about a 2 minutes remaining, and I wanted to just give that time check for anyone that hasn't spoken yet, who would like to connect with the speakers, or share an insight or a question you have, or something you wonder about. Or words of wisdom from our two speakers in terms of lifting this off the ground, and balancing those times when it may feel like there's how do you balance and push back the overwhelmness when you first start, I guess.
I think starting small, definitely. Start with just what is the next thing after where your school is right now. Do you already have, a stipended position? Maybe you push for the next thing. But starting small, and then as you feel like you have needs, make sure your administration hears those from you. I feel like a lot of our district wasn't even aware that it was something they could say, hey, I would love to have my students do XYZ. I would love to have this person come in for this thing, and say, I don't have the time to facilitate this myself. Just saying that and encouraging your colleagues to make administration aware of the fact that that is something you would like to have and it's a need, could be enough to create that little space to have a stipend, to be able to get a duty period or whatever it is to get to that next level. I think that's a big thing, is that people don't talk a lot about the need for more career exploration in our schools across the board. It's not a commonly talked, unless you're in a CTE program or in Work Like Us. I don't hear it all that often from your general education teachers. And so bringing that more into the forefront in whatever ways you can, I think will start to naturally give you more resources.
I think community surveys, key. It's good politics. It helps pass school budgets. So those are my closing words.
Two very insightful suggestions, both from Lynette and Rick, in terms of just those relationships in the community. Well, I want to thank Lynette and Rick a great deal for kicking this off for us, for a really well-developed presentation. And this will be posted on the department website, and so folks can view it again, or have or invite others to view it. I see Meg's hands up. Meg?
I'm just clapping.
Oh, okay.
We have progressed to the next level of Zoom knowledge.
Yes.
There we go.
Yes.
The clap and the raising hand looks very similar right now, but the thumbs up is very distinctive. Thank you. Thanks so much. And I don't know, Rick and Lynette, if I didn't talk to you about this beforehand. Do you want to, are you willing to share your PowerPoint and have it be linked with this, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I'll send it to you now.
Okay, thank you. And thanks so much. Really, really great job. And Rick, you did some nice advertising for Erica's virtual job shadow.
Yeah, well, I should have plugged that. I'm getting my faces and names all mixed up. It's Thursday. But Erica, thank you, and Diana and Meg and Lynette for doing all the work. So thank you.
Diana, where can they find this recording later if they want to share it with their people?
So that I got to sort out with the department, because it will definitely be linked on the Career and Education Development site, but I think it's also going to be linked all together with a co-collection of across the content area. I think we're going to have it in a large place and then also on the website. So they'll definitely be able to find it on the Career and Education Development website. And it's probably going to be linked in a larger repository as well. And I can indicate that on the CED website once that gets sorted out. Sean, our webmaster, is charged with figuring that that piece out in terms of where they go. But the department has made a commitment beyond the what we've been doing so far, that we're going to continue our support through at least the first 3 weeks of June. So that's where this big repository of professional learning is. That's what Sean's sorting out. But I can't thank the two of you enough for just how well you organized this and how you really provided all these on-ramps for people, and you planted some great seeds. So it'll be interesting to see how they play out in terms of conversations that will ripple from this as people think about it. And,
Thank you.
well, I can't
Thank
really
you
thank
all.
Yeah, and have a great afternoon. And if I don't see you, enjoy this summer weather this weekend,
Wow.
especially tomorrow, and then coasting through. Just soak it up. We really need it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Take care,
All right.
guys.
Take
Bye.
care.
all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.